Okay, welcome back. And second part of the program, and our guest this time is Dr. Olukayode Oyeleye. He's an agriculture business analyst. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you very much. You always respond when we invite you. Now, this food crisis, a lot of that, if not all of it, is going to be about agriculture. We have figures in the region of what? 31.5 million people across 26 states, reportedly, that these people are in danger of hunger. Urban centers might say that they don't really know the problem as acutely, but when they look at the price of food, whether it is in the market, whether it is in your canteen or your bukateria, has sometimes 3 times to 4 times as much as you used to pay before. That's when they know that for now, they are managing to sort of keep the boat floating, but only just barely. So let me start off by saying that you being a stakeholder in this conversation, how bad is this situation really? Is Nigeria, other countries use expressions like starvation. We haven't come to that level, or have we?
Well, we have not come to the level of starvation, obviously. But if things are not controlled and the situation is not arrested, I know too distant a future, starvation may start staring people in the face. That's the truth about it. What we need to talk about now is presently Nigerians are adjusting by way of maybe reducing the quantity of what they consume, or the frequency of consumption.
Yes.
And that's why when you talk about people having 3 square meals in a day, now people have like about 2, or sometimes even less. And then, of course, if you talk about these things really affect, more seriously. They are people down the ladder economically, whose income is very small. And then, of course, those in that category, again, depending on the size of families, it affects them a lot. There's that problem about how to feed a large family for people who subsist on low income. So that's a major issue. And so really, starvation may not be unleashed on a nation overnight, but it can also come gradually with some telltale signs. And I think the signs are all over the place for us to see. When you talk about the figures, 31.5 million, well, usually, I mean, as someone who deals with data, I would say that I have a lot of reservation about a number of, or even most of the figures we bandy about officially, because first and foremost, how did we come about that figure? That's the first thing. Another is that even when we talk about Nigeria's population, as far as today is concerned, it's still based on guesstimate. The last time we did census, what we had since then up to now had been annual increment by way of estimation. And so it's not as if we really have something, hard and fast that we can talk about right now. But even then, it's still worrisome. That's the way I want to put it now.
It is worrisome.
Yes,
and the government is reportedly struggling to stem this tide. All sorts of people are coming into, when I say all sorts of people, really I should just group that under people who are trying to bring a humanitarian angle to the whole thing. But government for itself, when you look at the way, when the president took over, the situation is said to be worse now than at that time. And probably one can understand. We don't need to go back to, look, a lot stems from the whole matter of removing the subsidy on fuel. A lot stems from that. Now, government is still struggling. There's a report that says that IDPs across the country are expected to increase from 14,000 to 83,000. And these are very... you said that you tend to take these figures with
a pinch of salt.
With a pinch of salt.
Yes, it might be on the higher side, it might be on the lower side, but the bottom line is that it's still worrisome all the same.
It is. Yes. It is still worrisome.
Yes.
So whereas government, when government talks about releasing grain from the strategic reserve, A lot of people, can you sort of explain that and how that is expected to be able to at least address part of the problem, if not all of it?
Okay, we've been on this issue of releasing grains from the strategic food reserves now for about 2 months. I remember the last time I was on this program in the studio, we spoke about it. And the issue is, do we really have an idea of what we actually have in our reserve? That's one thing. And how far can this go? That's another thing. And then by the time we get to the stage of distribution, the issue of leakages, the issue of logistics and many other issues around even spoilage, because we may not know what quantity of what is in the reserve had actually gone bad that cannot be given out for consumption. So we now have to deal with a plethora of issues. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we now want to ask ourselves how much really would get to the intended beneficiaries. Yeah. And then, of course, the interest in the process, those who are involved in the distribution, what are their interests? Because some of these might find their ways into the market. Some might also go, across the country. It's not impossible. And then, of course, some will still be kept away. Now, the problem actually is that if we don't have a well-articulated system by which we will distribute this to the intended beneficiaries, it might still end up not achieving any appreciable impact on the people. And then again, the issue is...
Sorry, sir, you said something I needed a bit of clarification on there. You said the impact of spoilage is not often taken into account.
Yeah.
One thought that this whole matter about national storage and the reserves was a highly evolved and scientific process. You think that you could stock stuff in there and it's going to last for as long as possible, but you're saying not necessarily so.
Correct, it's not necessarily so. Quite a number of, or even quantity-wise, a lot of what is stored.
Spoils.
Yes, of course.
So how does that happen?
Okay.
Or is that normal?
Well, start from how this agricultural produce is aggregated.
Yes.
And what are their conditions when they are brought in? For instance, we want to talk about corn. Have they been dried up to like about 14% moisture level that is expected of them? And if not, then of course, if the moisture level is higher than that 14%, of course, over a short period of time, it starts growing moldy.
And so nobody's going to take it into the silos, is my thinking.
Well, that's your thinking, but in reality, much of this will get into the silo. And don't also forget the contractors that are, appointed to supply. Many of them have political connections that actually circumvent some of these, checks and balances. And so they get into the storage all the same, and some of them will get spoiled. The same goes with even paddy, and some other, food items like that. So when you look at that, the issue of quality control is actually very paramount here in ensuring a reduction to a very low level of how much of what gets wasted. So we cannot rule out that aspect of what gets wasted by way of spoilage in storage.
Wow. Now let's also look at government on its own is struggling, as we said, with this problem. How about other people who are taking, a humanitarian approach to the whole thing? One of the front runners on this is Dangote, the richest man in Africa, the richest company in Africa, or at least his business group. And, he has flagged off a distribution of 120,000 bags of 10 kilogram bags of rice to the needy in Kano and Lagos. Then there's also another initiative where he's talking about 1 million 10 kg bags of rice to be distributed to reach 1 million vulnerable people in the entire 774 local governments. 10 kg of rice. We first of all have to be thankful. We have to appreciate whoever brings anything. But as humongous as those numbers would seem in the warehouse, wherever Dangote and his people are organizing those things, when you look at the actual number and the population that you referred to earlier, How would you categorize efforts like this? He's not the only one. Dangote is not the only one, but at least he's in the Lagos State, for instance, also is trying its own efforts to set up special markets where people can go in and buy things at much reduced prices. But talk to me about these interests, these intervention interests.
Okay. Yes, the act of philanthropy is actually praiseworthy. So one commends Dangote's efforts. The fact that he tries to come in to give some food items to people. But like you rightly pointed out, yeah, the figure looks very big when you look at it on the surface. But then, of course, 10-kilogram bag of rice to how many people? And then for how many days will they consume? Here's the problem. In peacetime, such humanitarian supports pale into insignificance. The reason is very simple. People are mobile, people can move around. It's not as if their movements are restricted like in the case of war or natural disasters and what have you. It is in those cases, yes, they make so much of a difference. But for those who, well, maybe the number of meals they have in a day had only been, drastically reduced, you give that to them, the impact wouldn't really be so much felt. But at least as a stopgap or as an immediate, a measure to actually reduce the impact of this food shortage on them, yes, it's commendable. But what we should be looking at actually goes beyond this idea of merely distributing food items. We should be thinking about how do we support producers. We should be targeting the farmers, especially the rural farmers, for instance, so they can produce. And thankfully, many of the food items that we consume are staples, like corn, like rice, like cowpeas. They are short duration crops that within a space of 3 months or below, they get to maturity after planting. So we can actually harvest and then have a quantum increase, in supply of food, for us. So we should be talking about...
So that's where we should be concentrating.
Yes, we should concentrate...
Greatest effort.
Correct. We should concentrate on supporting these farmers. If we give them planting materials, for instance, and then, of course, we support them with soil enriching facilities or inputs like fertilizer.
Not to mention security, supporting them also.
No, sure. Security is also very, very important. And if we give all this to them, and then again, the issue of weather, because one, we expect that the weather should be friendly, rain should come at the appropriate time. But in states where there had always been, most of the time, this shortage of rains, irrigation facilities can also come in to assist, so that when they are supported, they will be able to produce significantly to boost food production and, for more people to consume. So what is given for consumption goes away almost immediately, and it doesn't get back to the system.
That's the problem. That's the problem with all these efforts that I said are gigantic. Can you imagine anybody loading up from his own... did I have a caller from Oshogbo? Did I get that right? Is it caller from Oshogbo? Good morning. Can you hear me? Caller from Oshogbo, is that right?
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning. I can't hear you in studio, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, I want to continue this food crisis issue. The major problems we have in the country, if getting it right.
Okay, it's slightly better now. Maybe we can get it a bit more. But please carry on, caller. Please carry on. Carry on, sir.
Yeah, one is insecurity. Two is people are not ready to go to farm again. And I think the only way to do is to encourage the farmers, the real farmers. I'm not talking of Thai scholar farmers. And the only way they can get through that is to go through the local government, because each local government has its Agric session, so that they can go through that and make sure that they register those who are real farmers, along with the traditional rulers who know their people. The insecurity, I think, the government can still... The government of Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu is doing very, very wonderfully well as far as the menace of insecurity is concerned. But they can still do better. The government can still do better. Those are my contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kola, for calling in from Osun State. Tinubu's government is doing well, but there's a lot of room for improvement, according to him. And he, went over those areas that you were speaking about, but sort of get a sort of a tight approach on it, involve traditional rulers, know who the real farmers are, and those kind of things. You would have thought that these are things that we would have got on some time ago.
Well, I'm not too sure I agree with him about involving traditional rulers in farming and all of those things. I think majority of those who farm in this country, north, south, east, and west, do it on their own as personal, individual ventures, whether on commercial scale or on subsistence scale. So, well, bring in traditional rulers, then you now establish another layer of, quasi bureaucracy, and that's not what we are looking for, because we're talking about food here that time element is of essence, and then of course you don't want to bring in a case where people will now have to be called to come and sit down and then we allocate this, we give you this and that. Yes. It's going to actually defeat the whole essence.
It will be
counterproductive in summary.
Mazi Okorafo, good morning to you, sir. I think you're our last caller today. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, our guest. You see, sir, any calculation we'll be making in Nigeria today in terms of food crisis, there is only one option we should do. Let us go back to the basis that in those 70s, 80s, that Obasanjo program of school to learn program.
Operation Feed the Nation.
School to learn program, yes. If 36 states of the federation, as you rightly look on the caption there, we'll go back to school to learn program that all these our youth that we have today are waiting for palliative. We engage them. Sayori will be exporting any type of produce in any local government to outside Nigeria with standard production. So the God of contention is that school to learn program is and we have to what is creating all this problem about the NEPA, about this daylight, about this is because food is not sufficient.
All right, Mazi, we're going to have to leave it there. So sorry, but we don't have the time anymore. Maybe your quick comment on that last idea about, remember Obasanjo's Operation Feed the Nation, OFN. What's different between that and now?
Well, time has changed many things, and then some of those paradigms may not be exactly as applicable today as they were. We're talking about over 40 years ago. So we should be talking more now about new paradigms as to what can help us to be able to meet our needs. And then before the time runs out, I would have to come back to the government. Government should move its officers, beginning with the ministers. Let them be on the field. Let them relate with the subnational governments like the states and the local governments, and then look at how individual states can latch on their areas of comparative advantages and get into massive production.
We're going to have to leave it there.
Yes.
Thank you very much that you got that bit out. Dr. Olukayode Oyeleye, Agriculture Business Analyst. Appreciate you as always.